Okay, everyone, you join us now inside of the 2025 Mazda CX-70, and let's go take this thing on a drive. And of course, we have the plug-in hybrid CX-70 here, and if you haven't checked out the full tour and review, definitely go have a watch at that. But of course, we have this pretty interesting powertrain here. So we have a 2.5-liter naturally aspirated 4-cylinder up front, paired to an electric motor sandwiched in between that engine and this 8-speed Mazda designed multi-clutch gearbox, sending power to all 4 wheels. But it has a rear-wheel drive bias, as this is a rear-wheel drive longitudinal based architecture here. And before we head off and talk about all these interesting stuff with this powertrain, let's check out these awesome cameras we have on here. So we have a pretty nice reversing camera that has 2 different views. You can kind of hear that plug-in hybrid sound pulsating in the background. And when we're not in reverse, we have some pretty nice cameras for the front view as well to help you and aid in parking. Very crystal clear views, I would say, here. And we also have standard views as well as our really wide panoramic views as well for both the front and rear. So I really like these camera options. They seem to stay on for a while, even while you're driving, actually, which is pretty interesting. So cool camera system here. It's very Range Rover-esque in that aspect here. We have a few different drive modes to select through as well. We have our normal mode, sport mode, EV, off-road. Sport mode is going to combine all of this whole powertrain system, and it will always have that gas engine on. Normal mode is kind of like your standard hybrid mode, so it's going to prioritize that EV range, but when you kind of need that full power, it's going to turn on the gas engine, as you can see from right there. And of course, we have pure EV mode, which locks it into your pure electric driving range for as long as you have it, and you can only use that EV motor to kind of get you around. And off-road mode is really just going to give you some additional traction assistance if you do need it in some slippier situations there. So in EV mode, we're starting off here. We have a pretty decent amount of power of around 170 horsepower with this pure electric motor. And if you do floor it, pushing the kick pedal down, it will activate that full boost system there. So it'll kind of kick it back into normal mode, actually. But if you want to floor it in EV mode, just don't push all the way down and you'll kind of lock it in EV mode. You still have a pretty nice amount of power here, actually, in pure EV mode, which actually quite is nice, especially for going around town. It's a nice, smooth, seamless experience, and you will actually feel it shifting through the 8 gears because it is still having to go through that as it's in front of this gearbox here. We also have some pretty nice regenerative capabilities here on the CX-70 plug-in hybrid. So I love this energy flow monitor screen that's kind of telling you what's happening. You can change your regen from low to high as well. Not many plug-in hybrids models actually really do that, which is also a nice touch. And our battery pack is almost fully charged here. It's around 90-ish%, which we can actually see here on our high voltage battery monitor. So it's going to show us we have 77% state of charge with around 23 miles, and our total combined range of around 190 miles when you're looking at this fuel tank. We have around half a tank right now, and our battery pack. Now, popping into sport mode, we're getting full power here, and it uses the electric motor now as almost a boost function. So going on it, see it says boost here, and this thing is quick. We have 323 horsepower and over 360 pound-feet of torque combined, and honestly, for a vehicle that's over 5,100 pounds, it handles and drives pretty impressively. Mazda's steering is really sharp and very heavily weighted. If you're not a fan of that, unfortunately, you can't really change the steering feel here, but it's really, really impressive for the dynamics of this vehicle, especially with how it's essentially a front mid-engine car, and all of that battery weight and all that stuff is really mounted quite low down. So it feels heavy, but it's managed well. You can see it's saying boost there because we have our EV boost mode on. And I will say, in both this and the CX-90, there's this weird kind of sound going into through second gear. I think Mazda almost engineered this in here to kind of give you a little more emotion, but it's a little bit unsettling in some cases, I will say. This is our main view. We can also turn on our driver assistance view that we can see right here. So we have a few different angles you can kind of get this digital cluster at, but typically this is going to be the one you're going to want to have it in at all times. And I have to say, the dynamics for a vehicle of this size going around corners is really one of my favorite things that both I experienced in this and the CX-90. It handles itself quite well. Now, the suspension is a little bit on the stiffer side, but compared to the CX-90s I have driven in the past, this honestly feels a little bit more softly damped than previous, which I think helps a lot better on day-to-day driving situations. You don't have as much undulations and bumps coming into the cabin here. You can also paddle shift this thing manually as well through the 8 gears, which it sounds quite good, I do have to say. With the 4-cylinder, naturally aspirated, no turbocharging stuff going on here. And it goes through those gears pretty nicely if you do want to shift it yourself. And Mazda has their kinematic posture control, which uses sort of like a torque vectoring by braking to kind of help you adjust that power, especially if you're on it around a corner. Really helps to modulate power well and to kind of steer you into that corner. Like I said, this thing is pretty quick for such a large SUV, and it's, again, handles itself really, really well. But we all know that about this vehicles now. Both this and the CX-90 kind of stand out on that point. But how is this really different than a CX-90? Well, it's not that much different. It's really losing around 50-ish pounds versus the CX-90 as it's kind of getting rid of that third row here. And on the highway, performance of between this and the CX-90 plug-in hybrid are pretty much identical. You're going to see 60 miles an hour at around 5.5 to 5.9 seconds, which is respectable for a vehicle of this size. It's essentially a full-size vehicle kind of playing as a mid-sized vehicle. And out here on the highway, it still handles itself quite well. Going over bumps, there's a little bit of some unsteadiness in some cases, but most of the time it's very, very smooth going across the road here. And thankfully we have the Premium Plus model here, and Mazda has actually increased their packaging over these past year and a half or 2 years now since the CX-90's been out, and it's great to see that they've made these changes here on the CX-70 as we are getting so many safety systems standard now. And this has Mazda's full safety system suite here. So once we get out onto the highway here, we're going to be able to test this full radar adaptive cruise control, and you really do have everything around you here. Popping open this screen really gives you a nice view of what's happening around you at all times. Your blind spot's going to be monitoring you 360 at all times, and that's going to display both in that heads-up display over here as well as in your digital cluster, which I think is a really nice touch. You can see here, getting up to speed on the highway, it's using both EV and gas power. And generally, it's also quite quiet in this cabin on the highway, though if you do want it to be even more quiet, you can actually close this upper sunshade over here from the large panoramic glass roof. I've actually noticed it gets even more quiet out here on the highway here. And now we already get to test our adaptive cruise control system here. And of course, as all adaptive cruise control systems, you really just set it and it now gets going for you already. So this one has steering assistance. So it's not one of those systems where you can take your hands off the wheel and let it drive as it's monitoring your face, but you can confidently, I would say, kind of have to grab something, or if you have a kid in the back seat, deal with whatever they're kind of going on about quickly without feeling unsafe, and it will start beeping at you if you have your hands off the wheel for too long. But generally, I think it works quite well out here on the highway. Set your speed and kind of just let it do its thing. It will alert you if it's deactivating or if you need to put your hand on the wheel through vibrations as well as what's happening around you on the highway. And I really like these nice big graphics on the heads-up display over here, showing you pretty much what we're seeing over here. So they want you to keep your eyes focused on the road. That same thing goes with their infotainment system over here. So going into Apple CarPlay, for example, it's really nice in your line of sight. Now you can touch it as well if you want to use it as a touchscreen, or you can use Mazda's control wheel over here, which is quite nice, and you have quick access to go to and from your Mazda infotainment system and to Apple CarPlay. So whatever screen you stay on this system, hold that home button down, and it will take you right back into whatever screen you're on in Apple CarPlay, which is a really cool little feature there as well. Now out here on the highway, again, I really like these graphics that this Mazda Radar Adaptive Cruise system shows you here. It shows you the curves, it's showing all the vehicles around you as well. It even uses a little Mazda 3 hatchback as a follow vehicle, which is a pretty cool touch. And deactivating this is pretty easy. You kind of just press these buttons and it kind of goes away if you don't want it. Set it, forget it. You can also, of course, adjust your following distance as well out here on the highway. You have a few different settings for your following distance. And you also have that multi-function display over on the right-hand side, which can show you things like your fuel economy and a few other different things. So I've definitely seen numbers high in the 30s. So we have it split here between our battery fuel economy as well as our engine fuel economy. And when you are driving out here on the highway in hybrid mode for quite some time, you're you're going to see it creep up into the 30 mpg range. EPA estimates are around 26 to 28, but I've definitely seen way better numbers out actually in person than what we're seeing on the EPA. Same thing goes with this EV range on this battery pack as well. I've been seeing almost 29, 30-ish miles out of a full charge versus what the EPA is setting around 26. So far so good pretty on these numbers here, but that all varies with how you are going to be driving your plug-in hybrid Mazda. Braking performance is also quite good on the CX-70 plug-in hybrid. Same thing as the CX-90. Brake feel can be a little bit soft at first, but the brakes themselves are quite strong. And you have to remember that this is using a sort of blended system between that regenerative braking and your actual friction brakes we have here. And I have to say, Mazda does that transition quite well. This is so illegal. Mazda does do that transition actually quite well. You really don't notice between the two, but you'll definitely actually see your regen go down when you are getting into those pure friction brakes over here. Let's go ahead and back onto the highway. For a little bit of a downhill, we can get a chance to kind of test out the acceleration of the CX-70 plug-in hybrid here. Come to a full stop, and it definitely gets up to speed quite quickly, especially with that instant torque from the electric motor really helping to smooth into the transition between that electric motor and the gas powertrain, which is a quite nice touch there. And speed on the highway itself is also quite good. So if you aren't in a position where you do need to pass a truck in front of you, for example, getting around it and getting up to speed from that 50 to like 60 or 70 pole is also quite good here. So never really have any issues in terms of performance here. To prove it, you don't only need that in sport mode. You can go straight into normal mode and get that same power experience. Nice and quick up to speed there, really no complaints whatsoever. So again, I think this vehicle is going to be really fantastic for families that like to haul a lot more cargo around versus having that third row and having a lot more passenger volume. This is an interesting choice here. Now, if you don't need all this additional space, Mazda does have the CX-50, which is smaller, has the turbocharged 2.5 liter, and currently there's no plug-in hybrid, but there soon will be a hybrid model coming, a regular series hybrid with some Toyota hybrid technology baked into it, as they're partnering with Toyota on that. So I think that's going to be a more interesting option for people who don't want this gigantic vehicle that's 200 inches long and don't need all the additional cargo space. That might be a better option for you. But the CX-70 definitely stands out, not only in its interesting packaging within this segment, but also its really strong, awesome looks, really incredible interior, and unique driving dynamics. And again, we also have that inline-six option for you if you don't want this plug-in hybrid variant, and 2 different power outputs as well, with all the pretty much exact same features and options. And it's a mild hybrid system, which is still going to help you improve fuel economy as well. Otherwise, guys, I'm pretty impressed with this CX-70, just as I was with the CX-90. Is it for everyone? No, but I quite like it, and I would definitely recommend one if you're looking for a unique vehicle in this mid-size segment that has more space than the rest of all of its competitors. And of course, if you need that third row, go straight to the CX-90, which can honestly be cheaper in some cases than this CX-70 itself. Nonetheless, guys, thank you guys for joining me on this video, and as always, stay tuned for more coming in Allcarnews. Cheers.